I've been working as a food delivery driver for about 8 months now. With how my contract works, I need at least 3 evening shifts, with 2 of those being between Friday and Sunday. I don't really mind working in the evenings since it has a nice vibe to it, being really calm. Just throw on some headphones and a good playlist or podcast and you're good. Plus, I never work for more than 4.5 hours on end since I work on an e-bike, so I can't do longer shifts without my battery dying. Keeping in mind, the bike needs to take me home as well. Apart from some stupid encounters I've had with teenagers trying to be funny in front of their friends, like biking after me and asking me for food or pretending to be the customer, I've never had anything creepy happen to me. That was until a few weeks ago. It was a Thursday evening. I had a shift from 5:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Where I live, us delivery drivers get paid per hour instead of per delivery. This has its advantages and disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is that we can't decline orders on our own end. If we, for whatever reason, can't take an order, we need to talk with the company we work for. So whatever trip is thrown at us, we have to take. Up until this point, I'd been having good, close-by deliveries from nice local restaurants. None of the journeys were to faraway places, which was good. The weather was fine, it was cold, but if you layer yourself well enough, it's not that bad as long as it just doesn't rain, which luckily it didn't. It was around 8:15 p.m. when I got a McDonald's order. The customer lived around 12 minutes away from the restaurant, which wasn't ideal, but it was fine since I only had lost 1 stripe of battery so far. The location it was going to was also a good one, since the only time I need to get off the bike lane was to cross roads. Other than that, it was all bike lanes. I picked up the order after waiting for around 15 minutes. I got back onto my bike, chose a playlist, and made my way over to this customer. The streets were pretty quiet, setting the vibe. As I got closer to the customer's house, I made my way onto the sidewalk and cycled slowly, trying to find the house number, which can be a pain at night. I eventually did and locked my bike up. I walked over to the door and knocked. After a few seconds, I heard commotion and placed my bag down, taking out the food. The door opened and a lady greeted me with a smile. After handing her the food and telling her to enjoy it, she thanked me, and after giving me a tip, closed the door back up. I got back onto the bike and unlocked it. I had been charging my phone with my power bank, but wanted to take the charger off since my phone was now full enough, and dealing with the wire sticking out of my jacket pocket can be a hassle when taking off and putting back on my backpack. However, I always feel awkward and watched, staying in the front yard for too long, especially when they have those doorbell cameras, so I made my way over to a small alleyway close to the house. As I turned back off my bike, I took out my power bank to turn it off. Then I changed my playlist, and as I was putting the power bank back into my pocket, I heard slow footsteps creeping closer to me from behind. Now, this alleyway I was standing in was pretty narrow and small, so I was probably blocking it. I quickly moved and got off my bike, holding it close to me as I pressed myself onto the wall. I excused myself and made a gesture for the person to pass. Instead of thanking me and walking on, the person just kept standing there. This is when I looked up. I was met with a tall, skinny lady standing just a few inches away. Her face was slim and her long hair came to rest on her shoulders. Her face looked white and she looked like a heroin addict. She looked me dead in the eye without any expression and was breathing through her mouth. She was wearing brown jeans and a blue hoodie with the hoodie on. "Can I help you?" I asked after painful moments of silence. She looked at me for a few more seconds and said, "You have my food." I froze. Now in our app system, there is no way to actually confirm that the customer was the right one since we don't have any security codes to ask. Since I was busy with my power bank, I hadn't clicked finished order yet. I checked my phone and decided to ask the lady questions about the order. "Oh, I think another driver has your food. I just delivered to someone else," I said with a smile. "Where did you order from?" If she was right, I would have been able to help her easily with getting a refund. However, she just stared at me, her expressionless face turning into a hard, ugly glare. "No," she said loudly. "That was my food," she stated. Again, I tried to reason with her, asking for her name and what food she had ordered. "I'm just trying to help you, ma'am. Check your app. The app should tell you how far the driver is." To this, she stepped back and pointed her hand at me. "My food. I need my food." At this point, I figured she must be homeless and hungry. "I have food if you want," I said. Now, I always keep snacks on me in case I have to wait long for an order to get ready or have no orders come in for a bit. We wait a lot since we can't turn down orders for taking too long to be made. My go-to work snacks are protein granola bars. They're easy to keep since they don't take up much space and you can eat them fast. I decided to give her a box and maybe she'd be satisfied. I took one out of my backpack and handed it to her. She took it from me, damn near snatching it out of my grip, and stepped closer. "I want my food," she stated sternly, her glare sharp. I let out a breath, getting really creeped out now, and once again asked her to check her app or give me her name. The name she put up with her so-called order. She took a big breath, and before I could say anything else, she exhaled and screamed bloody murder, making me flinch and press myself onto the wall. In the process, I accidentally moved my bike's throttle. This thing alone doesn't get around past 4 kilometers per hour. I had some struggle, but eventually got on the bike and pedaled away, the lady still screaming behind me. I got to a fence that prevented cars from coming in and had to slow down a bit. This was enough time for the lady to catch up and even grab onto the back of my bike. I let out a yelp as I could feel her try to push me. I also heard something scrape the wall next to me. I didn't want to look and instead put my bike on a higher assist mode, which I normally never do and always keep on 2 or 3 to spare battery life, pedaling like my life depended on it as I got past the fences. I then put it even higher and cycled away. I could hear the lady yelling and calling me a food thief. As I glanced back, she held the box of granola bars above her head and threw them at me. They landed about a meter away from me. I also noticed what was causing that scraping noise, as she was holding a knife in her hand. I focused back on the road and cycled away, hearing the lady still screaming, yelling, and trying to run after me. Eventually, I went back to the app and finally clicked finished order, hoping to get a new one since I didn't want to aimlessly cycle around in fear of running into her, since I thought she might know all the shortcuts. I got a new order from a kebab place nearby, around 8 minutes away. This place was one I got sent to a lot, and the owner was very friendly, always asking us drivers if we wanted something to eat or drink and saying it was on the house. I got there and was slightly out of breath. He asked me what happened, gave me some water to drink, and helped me calm down, then gave me some food. After I told him, he talked to the company, saying I was in no state to keep doing deliveries. My work agreed to allow me to end my shift earlier. One of my co-workers came for the pickup, and since this delivery was just outside of city center, I biked back with him to the city, where it was still busy, and went on home after that. I'm very glad for the timing of that order, my co-worker, and for the owner of the kebab store. I don't even want to know what that lady would have done to me if she had successfully pulled me off my bike. So I had this boss, who I'll call Mike, and he had come to fill in for a few months while my regular boss was on maternity leave. He was pretty amazing. He inspired me to work harder and even ended up promoting me. The 2 of us and a 3rd employee that I'll call James were always working shifts together. It was fun, just laughing and kicking ass because we all had a similar sense of humor, and James and I were definitely the best employees there. After Mike's time to fill in was over, James and I were super bummed because he was seriously the best manager. He was fair and rewarded hard work and truly cared about employee satisfaction. Plus, he just made everything fun, even though we were working harder. We both looked up to Mike as a manager and as a human being. We had the utmost respect for him, and we vowed to keep in touch when we parted ways. Well, fast forward a year or so, James and I ended up dating. Kept in touch with Mike, and he was so happy we ended up together because he thought we were both great people who deserved each other. We saw Mike a few more times and kept in touch over the years through social media. When James proposed and we started planning our wedding, we knew we wanted Mike to be in it. He was part of our trio back before James and I even knew we would be together, and the 3 of us had a bond. We asked him to read something during the ceremony and he accepted, expressing how honored he felt. Well, when it got to the day of the wedding, Mike was nowhere to be seen. We kept calling him as the ceremony was quickly approaching, and finally, James got a hold of him. Mike told him that he couldn't get out of work and wouldn't be able to make it. We were both taken aback a little because the Mike we knew and looked up to would never bail like this, not even let us know. We figured there had to be some reasonable explanation and were pretty disappointed, but the wedding had to go on. We had James' niece do the reading, even though Mike's name was printed in the program. Well, fast forward again, a few more years. We had only spoken to Mike a handful of times since the wedding, but he had also taken the time to write me a beautiful, lengthy recommendation letter in that time period. There were no hard feelings about the wedding, and James and I still shared the highest of opinions of our friend. Then Mike kind of disappeared off of social media, and the next time we tried calling him, his phone number had changed. James and I exchanged sentiments of concern and hoped he was doing okay, but it didn't go much past that. One day, James got a random call from a number that wasn't in his contact list. He answered it, and it turned out to be Mike, so he put it on speakerphone so I could say hello too. We had our brief pleasantries, but then Mike got into the reason for this call. He wanted to know if he could stay with us for a day or two. My initial reaction was, of course, but James shot at me a sharp look, so I added, well, let us discuss it and we'll call you back. Before concluding the call, James inquired about what was going on. Mike said he had been living with his father to take care of him because he was terminally ill, that he couldn't stay there another night because he checked the camera footage in their home and seen his dad on tape, standing over him with a knife while he slept. When the call was ended, James said he thought something was off. I didn't really get why he'd instantly be that suspicious. I mean, the story was insane and all, but it was Mike. James said something like, we haven't heard from him in forever, and now he's calling us for a favor. He lives 2 hours away, and we're the ones he calls? Why wouldn't he seek the help of someone closer? He has family in the area too. I agreed that it was all odd, and it definitely conjured up a lot of questions, including why there were even cameras inside their house, but I still didn't like the idea of leaving Mike hanging if he was truly out of options. I told James we should call back and probe a little more. When we called back, James asked if it wouldn't be easier to have someone closer help him out and asked about family in the area. Mike gave a vague explanation of why everyone in his life had turned against him. Then, with the most mopey, disappointed voice, he said it was okay if we couldn't help, that he understood what was going on and wouldn't bother us anymore. James and I looked at each other and said we'd call him right back. We quickly discussed that this was all very strange, but that he had to be pretty desperate to contact us for help. We acknowledged that his little bit about understanding if we were unable to help was meant to manipulate us, and we felt conflicted about everything, but ultimately decided a few days couldn't hurt. We called him back, told him that he could come, and figured we'd give him the address and that would be that. But he said he no longer had a vehicle and would need to be picked up. We asked about catching an Uber, and he said he had no money he could access at the moment, which we didn't pry him on. It was getting late, and it was a long drive to a location, so we asked if he had anywhere to stay for that night, and we could make the trip in the morning. He said he'd just sleep on a park bench or something, which, again, we knew was meant to manipulate us, but we didn't cave in on that one. We asked where we should pick him up the following day, and he gave us his dad's address. Immediately after we got off the phone, we were like, what the fuck has been going on with Mike that has ostracized him from all his friends and family and caused him to lose his car? He had been making 4x our salary when we first all met and had a brand new car. Now he didn't even have money for an Uber. We went and picked him up the next day, and I got out and ran up and gave him a hug. He seemed oddly unresponsive to my affection, so I just shrugged it off and showed him to the front passenger seat where I'd been sitting. He was super tall, so I let him sit up there and I hopped in the back. When we got back to our house, we showed him to our guest room and he put his things down, and then immediately asked if we could take him to the grocery store. James said he was done driving for the day, so I'd take him, but commented that I thought he didn't have any money on him. He told me he had food stamps, which there's no way he could have qualified for with his old job, so I know something was up. But I wasn't going to dig into the personal details of his finances, so I just logged it into my mind and kept my mouth shut. You might be thinking it just sounds like someone who fell on hard times, and that was basically Mike's story as well. But it was just very vague in important areas and full of story after story about people that seemed determined to destroy him for no known reason whatsoever. 1 or 2 bad eggs is believable, but no one is the innocent victim in every scenario. He was telling us that he had no idea why his life had fallen apart and why those close to him seemed to turn on him out of nowhere, or why so many people were out to get him without seeming to have any motivation. 2 nights turned into a week, and finally James asked Mike what his plan was. Mike acted hurt and said he'd be gone by the morning. We told him he didn't need to leave immediately, but we'd like to have some kind of an idea of his plan for going forward. That night in bed, James and I discussed it and decided we'd tell Mike that he could stay for as long as he needed if He wanted to help out around the house and keep his room relatively clean, because it contained several antique items of James' mother's. We were also going to ask him to help us with some business decisions, as Mike had claimed to have been a totally self-made successful entrepreneur before his streak of bad luck, series of unfortunate events, and I had recently been laid off. We presented our offer the next day, and Mike excitedly accepted. We thought it was going to be a rewarding trade-off for all parties. Now, this isn't a story about my marriage, so I'm not going to go too far into wealth of problems James and I had. But a little info will be necessary. James was highly critical of me and often talked down to me and seemed to have nothing but negative opinions. I wasn't perfect, but I wanted to be loved and worked my ass off for James' approval. I was constantly trying to make him happy, but no matter what I did, I would fail in his eyes. After a few weeks, Mike clearly started to see the cracks in the marriage, despite the fact that James toned it down in Mike's presence. Trying to be a good wife, I acted like all was fine in front of Mike and never mentioned any dissatisfaction in my marriage. Mike and I started to spend a lot of time alone in our entrepreneurial pursuits. He was supposed to be teaching me the tricks of the trade within several avenues of making money, but kept coming out with little success. He had excuses and explanations for why his wisdom didn't seem to be progressing us forward at all. But he was someone I greatly looked up to as a professional and a friend, so I just believed that it would all pay off soon, like he said. After living together for weeks, enough talking among all of us had been done to start noticing weird contradictions to many of the things Mike had told us, but he always worded things in a way that left a slight amount of room for doubt if you were to question any of it. There was never a way to straight up catch him in a lie. Mike also wasn't fulfilling his end of our deal at home and kept saying he'd take his turn to do the dishes and such, but probably only did it once or twice, and he completely trashed the guest room. Not only were there garbage everywhere, but he'd bring in food and drinks and they'd be lost in the sea of clothes and trash, and we could smell things rotting. There was a melted tub of ice cream sitting on the bedside table for weeks. I didn't care as much as James did, and I suggested we just remove his mom's things from the room, but I did agree that it was disrespectful. Meanwhile, things were getting more and more icy with James and me, and one day, when I was out with Mike on a job, I broke down in tears about how much I was hurting about how James treated me. Mike offered words of comfort and reluctantly admitted that he picked up on how mean James could be to me and said he was very sorry and that I didn't deserve it. Mike having been possibly the only witness I have ever had to what I had been going through in my marriage, this was amazingly validating. Mike agreed that it was incredibly unjustified, but made me promise not to tell James that he'd said anything because he didn't want to appear like he was taking sides. The next day, Mike had once again volunteered to take a turn doing the dishes, so I didn't do them. I hate doing dishes and happily left them for Mike when he assured me he'd handle it. Well, Mike got a call informing him that his dad didn't have long to live, so he wanted to go see him. James didn't seem at all interested in helping, so I volunteered to take him and to stay for moral support, and we headed out. On the way to see his dad, Mike started telling me his dad has dementia and makes up weird things, so he advised me not to take anything to heart. He cited a few examples of things he previously said, and they were all more like accusations. One of them being that Mike had stolen all the money in his savings. I thought it was pretty odd, but couldn't really reconcile the vast difference between the Mike I had met 8 years before and someone who could rob his dying father. While we were visiting his dad, I didn't say much, as I didn't want to insert myself into a private family moment, but I kept noticing things that were weird, like that his dad was fully conscious and talkative and didn't seem like a dying man at all. He even asked us to get him Burger King in the middle of it all. I kept trying to justify things in my head, like, who am I to say a dying man can't want a final meal at Burger King? A few hours in, James called, irate that I had left again without doing the dishes, that Mike promised to do. He chewed me out and threatened divorce, which was always his go-to to try to whip me into shape, and having the recent affirmation from Mike that I wasn't the only one who saw James' emotional abuse, I said, fine, divorce won't be thrown in my face anymore, so divorce it is. Back in Mike's dad's room, his dad was yelling about his will and money and such, and Mike looked at me in a way to signal that the dementia was talking. I had started to really question what happened with his dad and if he was really even dying at all, but it wasn't something I could really handle investigating at the moment, given that I just separated from my husband. When we left the hospital, Mike's dad was still alive and eating candy bars. I had nowhere else to go, so I went back home and slept upstairs on the couch. I didn't speak to James for 2 whole days, and then Mike said he talked to his mom, and I could stay there for a week. I I wondered why his mom wasn't the one helping him if they were in contact and on good terms, but I just accepted the offer. I couldn't take being at that house anymore. Mike said he was going to go with me and stay there too, which I thought looked really bad, but he said he spoke to James and that he understood and was fine with it. I spent the entire week crying and talking to Mike about how I felt, and he even woke up in the middle of the night with me if I woke up and started spiraling downhill. He made no advances on me or anything of the sort. After the week, I went to stay with my parents and Mike went back to stay with James. I eventually saw them both when I come over to get things, and in talking with James, he was very much ready for Mike to leave. They barely seemed to talk and did not seem on good terms whatsoever. One night, I got the weirdest impulse to ask James if Mike ever said anything about me that he made him promise not to tell me. James hesitated for a second but said yes. Through a series of questions, we inched through both of our experiences with Mike. He had been playing into our rapidly declining marriage and using everything he observed against us. He had been going out and teaching me things to make money, and he did the same thing he did as my boss all those years before. Told me my strengths and complimented my ability to catch up onto things quickly. We didn't have much success, but it was very obviously not on account of me. However, he was going back and feeding into James' terrible opinion of me and claiming we weren't making any money because I was so dense and hard to teach. Mike would also comment on the very same things he told me were unacceptable that James did, except he'd tell James how he doesn't know how he lives with someone like me and that he'd go insane. He was carefully and strategically forcing our marriage to fall apart by exaggerating our personal fears and insecurities and systematically validating and encouraging our resentment for one another. He did it in such a way that neither of us doubted his sincerity for a moment, until I finally got a weird feeling and decided to ask that night. And even then, I didn't really anticipate finding out that he had been two-faced and manipulative to that extreme. James kicked him out that night, and neither of us had talked to him again. As far as I know, I haven't spoken to James in like 1.5 years. I proceeded with a divorce despite this, because even though Mike was an insincere piece of shit, he caused me to get enough distance from James that I was able to see I deserved so much better. Last I heard about Mike was from his mom, who called me to see why he'd been asked so abruptly to leave James' house. I told her what he'd done, and she didn't seem surprised. I asked if she was aware of any mental problems he may have, and she said she didn't want to betray her son by giving details, but that he isn't right in the head. I asked about several of the traumatic events Mike had claimed to be the victim of, and she said there have never been evidence that any of it really happened. I don't know why he actually initiated the final downfall of my marriage, because I've never felt it was an attempt to be with me. I don't get what his motivation or gain would have been. Mike's mom texted me a few days after he left James' house to tell me he had been admitted to a psychiatric facility and wouldn't be out for a long time. She wouldn't elaborate. This incident happened in the summer of 2015. I lived by myself in a nice house inside a small town. Low crime, but still the occasional shady fucker. Anyway, at work that day on a smoke break, I watched a dog get thrown from a moving vehicle, 4-lane city traffic during the start of rush hour. I ran right out there, scooped his little ass up, and booked it back to my workplace. He wasn't injured, amazingly. As a bleeding heart animal lover, I decided to take him home with me until I could figure out what to do with him. I have a large number of cats and always have. This was my first experience with a dog that I was solely responsible for. This guy was very shy, head hung, tail tucked, and jumpy, just looking at me like I was about to beat him. I was clueless on the subject of dog personalities and tendencies. I just knew that they needed to be taken out frequently. His first night with me, we had been out about 15 times, as I didn't want him shitting in my house. I was having my final cigarette of the day on my porch. The dog was on the lead, chilling under my chair as I smoked and poked about on Reddit. I see a man walking on the sidewalk that runs by my house. He kept glancing up at me before passing. Shortly after he passed my house, he stopped, turned on his heel, and approached. "Hey, can you tell me where 302 Church Street is?" he asked. I told him I would search the address on my phone, which of course was taking a minute to pull up. He explained that he didn't have a phone of his own and was attempting to get to a friend's house, taking small steps toward me the whole time. Finally, the address I summoned came up. "It's exactly 2 blocks north of here, right on the southwest corner of the cross street," I told him, pointing in the direction. He kept his eyes locked on me, continuing to slowly move closer. Doggo starts growling very softly at this point. I had forgotten he was even there until now. Mind if I take a look at the map? He grinned sheepishly. I'm bad with directions. I rose from my seat, pointing again. It's truly just 2 blocks up this road. Just follow the road. 2 blocks. The house will be on your left. Making it very clear that I wasn't going to just hand him my phone. Well, can I call them? I need to let them know I'm coming, he said, still creeping closer, extending his hands. No, I replied. How about texting them? Pushing forward still. Dude, no. I started toward my door. Just let me see your phone. He was visibly becoming pissed off, clearly trying to contain it and getting way too close to my porch. As a last-ditch effort to get this dude to fuck off, I say, you need to get off my yard. My dog is protective, he'll fuck you up. Hell, I didn't know the first thing about this dog, let alone whether he had the capacity to screw someone up. I just hoped saying so would intimidate the pushy phone guy. Like I had said the magic words. Pupper springs into action. The wolf creature from the never-ending story emerges like a fucking bullet from under the chair, growling, snarling, barking his little ass off. He jerks me damn near off the porch trying to get at this guy. He sounded and acted like an 80-pound attack dog, not a 40-pound timid beagle mix. I was afraid. I didn't know if the pup would turn on me. As stated previously at the time, I knew absolutely jack shit about dogs. He backed his hindquarters into my legs and almost nudged me to the door. Still carrying on, eyes locked on the phone dude and baring his teeth. Phone dude holds up his hands and backs off. Stammers something like, 2 blocks north? Yeah? And begins walking that way. I go inside, cut off my lights and peek out the window at him. Glances at my house, assured I'm inside, turns and begins walking in the completely opposite direction I pointed him in. Icing on the cake, he pulls a phone from his pocket and raises it to his ear to make a call. Doggo secured his place as a member of the family that night. He is incredibly protective of me and has frightened away another creep since this incident. He's attached to my hip and has made it known that he is grateful to be in a safe, loving home, wherein he will never again become a projectile from a moving vehicle. His name is Hank, and I truly believe that night would have ended very poorly for me had he not been there. About 10 years ago, I was fresh out of college and trying to figure out what was next. I went to college on an athletic scholarship, and I was just as interested in enjoying my college experience as I was in completing it. I ended up with a communications degree, average grades, and no experience. I was working as a door host, bouncer at a smaller bar or lounge and casino. I worked at said bar Wednesday through Sunday from around 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. My job was to greet people coming in, check IDs, break up fights, and to remove people who got out of hand, while maintaining a professional and friendly manner. There was a man that started coming into the bar on the off nights, Wednesday or Thursday when it was slow. He would come in both nights 1 week, and then not come in again for 3 weeks or so. Then he would do the same thing, always on the off nights. Usually he would talk to me a couple times throughout the night when he was there, just normal small talk. It was never awkward. He was always well dressed in a suit, or at least a button-up shirt and slacks. He was clean cut, had an athletic build, no visible tattoos or piercings, and a shaved head. I'm not into men, but I guess he was a good-looking man in his late 30s. Well, the last night I saw him, the conversation was a bit different. He came in on an off night like normal, but eventually came up to talk to me by the door. The conversation started off normal, but eventually he asked me if I enjoyed what I did at the bar. I did the typical, it's not that bad, it's mostly easy, dissembling that I felt was polite conversation. He asked me how long I planned to be a bouncer, asked if I thought I made enough money, and eventually dragged me out of that no. I didn't particularly enjoy being a bouncer and didn't know what I was going to do with my future. At this point, he looked me straight in the face and said, well, you could kill people, while maintaining our eye contact. I paused and waited for some type of joke or smile or something that would turn this into a failed attempt at a joke. Nothing. He seemed 100% serious. There was no smile, no joke. Nothing but him staring at me, waiting for me to respond. At this point, I tried to tell him the first thing that came to mind. I'm pretty sure I don't have the skill set for what I think you're suggesting. He said, yeah, but you could learn all that. Think about it. You could travel, work once or twice a month, and get paid pretty well. Well, strangely, at that point in my life, it was an intriguing idea. I immediately thought of some sort of police setup and all the shadowy hitman handler betrayal I've seen in every hitman movie ever. I told him, "No, I don't think that's for me." Then he said, "Okay," and left. I worked there for another year and never saw him again.